Have you had a book idea in your mind or sitting on your heart for maybe years and just aren't really sure where to get started or not even sure how to get that idea out of your head onto your paper? Well, this video is for you. So I'm Charlotte. I am your book BFF. I am a book coach and developmental editor, and I work specifically with aspiring and baby authors in the fiction world. So when I wrote my first book, I know that it took years for me to get that idea out of my head, frame it in a way that even started to make sense. And then that's not even counting all the different elements around fiction that come up around how do you even write dialogue? How do you write characters? How do you develop characters? And so the goal of this video is to provide you with 7 tips for beginner writers to help you get your idea out of your head and onto paper and to get that story out into the world. So the first tip is literally planning your book, which may be no surprise, but this is really taking the idea and creating a concept out of it. Let's say, for example, that you have this idea of a small town and it's a detective that's solving a supernatural mystery. And you can start by brainstorming the ideas for the characters. So start thinking about maybe there's a quirky detective who's leading that, right? That's your main character or your protagonist. So what defines them? What makes them have a personality? So as you start to think about your main character, I want you to think about what their journey is going to be. And so a story literally has a beginning, middle, and end. I know it sounds super simple, but I want you to think about this character that you have in mind. If it's in the setting, right? So we can use this example of this quirky detective that's solving a supernatural mystery. Where does their story start? What happens to them in the middle? And then who do they become, or what do they experience by the end of the book? I want you just to think about getting that out onto paper and just get in the habit of getting your ideas out and literally put them on paper. Because once we have them on paper, then they're puzzle pieces we can work with. I'll share a little bit more later about actually outlining your book, but for right now, I want you to think about the concept of your story. And first is really is there enough going on in your idea and your story? That's the first thing that we're looking for with our concept in mapping out the beginning, middle, and end. And the second part of that is asking yourself, is this a concept that you're going to be super excited to write 90,000 words around? So sit with that, kind of think about the concept, map out a little bit of your protagonist, who they are, and then what happens to them in the beginning, middle, and end of your story. So tip number 2 is to write with a genre in mind. So again, if you love mystery and suspense, you might want to write a thriller or a cozy mystery. If you're a fan of epic adventures, then maybe you're doing fantasy or science fiction could be your genre. And I don't often tell writers to just jump into your genre, but what is interesting about a lot of genres within fiction is there's often a different formula for each kind of fiction, which you can find a lot through Google and just kind of reading more in that genre specifically, reading novels. And so, for example, with romance, there has to be a romance that's building throughout that book, and they end up together at the end. There is never a romance novel where they don't end up together. There's same with women's fiction. There needs to be a women's fiction character arc where she develops and becomes the person she needs to become to get what she wants. So spend a little bit of time just understanding what defines sci-fi, what kind of arcs are there within each of these genres. And that doesn't mean that you have to write to those, but it is great to understand the patterns that readers have learned to expect within each genre. So again, as you're thinking about the concept for your novel, this will also help you frame to understand what does need to happen in the beginning, middle, and end of your book. But the most important thing here is to not get stuck or feel like you're pigeonholed into a genre. It's most important that you just get the story out onto paper first, and you can always figure out what your genre is later. So don't get stuck there, but it can be really helpful just to dig in a little bit more and understand your genre. Okay, so tip number 3 is to outline your novel. So I know this is something that can be very controversial. A lot of people hate outlining, a lot of people live and breathe by it, and then there's a bunch of people in the middle. I will say when I started writing my first novel, I was anti-outlining. I was like, nope, I want to write by the seat of my pants, and I just want to be creative and let the story flow. It was great until I got stuck in the murky middle. I just kept running up against a wall when I was hitting 45,000 words, and I could not figure out how I was getting from there to the end with 90,000 words. And why this can be so challenging is just because it can feel really clear on how certain events are going to happen and the action that's taking at the beginning of the story. But then it's like, how do you move from there and then into resolution without making it a short story? So outlining, I like to take an approach of having a fairly robust outline with a lot of space in between for my creativity to flow, so that as I'm writing, I can still feel like I'm writing from the seat of my pants. And there's going to be areas where there's scenes that I'm like, I actually don't know how we're going to get from here to here, but that's the creative piece that I really love. So again, adapt this in a way that's going to work best for you. And one of the things that I love to use when I'm outlining my books is a 3-act structure. And there's many different things. There's like Save the Cat is also out there, which is a really fun way to outline. A lot of it is very similar. Again, there's a specific arc that definitely happens within fiction. And the 3-act structure is one of the ways that has been most helpful for me to get a fairly robust outline and then kind of fill in some of the pieces as I go. And so I have a blog post that outlines the 3-act structure really well. And so I will link that below so that you can also go visit that as you are starting to map out and outline your book. So tip number 4 for starting to write your book is to think about developing your characters. This can be something that a lot of writers I've worked with tend to want to skip over because they think they're going to develop as they're writing them, which is true-ish, but the more you can have that character filtered out and really clear on paper of who they are, who they have been, what their history is, all the things they've experienced before this period of time in the book that you're capturing, the better their responses are going to be consistent throughout your book, and the readers are going to be so hooked in and care so much about your characters that they're going to want to see, literally turn the page to see what's going to happen next. The example I always like to see is Dan Levy, who co-created Schitt's Creek, was talking about how his father made him sit there and work on character development for weeks before they could even finish writing the script or start writing the script. And I think that's so interesting because we all love those characters. That's one of my favorite shows, and I just love those characters because they're so well defined. And so this, again, I think is so applicable for when you're writing your book, is to really understand who your character is. Otherwise, they just kind of become really flat with people who happen to say things. A really fun activity for when you're just getting started as a writer is to actually think about your best friend and start writing and describing them as maybe a character for a book. I don't recommend using your best friend in a book, but get in the habit of writing down what makes them uniquely them. What are the things you love about them? What are the mannerisms that you notice about them? What are the little ticks and twerks that you always notice? Twerks, is that a word? I don't know. The little pieces that really just make them them. Write all of that down and build out a character profile of your best friend. That is exactly what you want to do with your characters in your novel. This goes for your main character, your protagonist, as it does the antagonist, also all of the other supporting characters. The more clear on who you are, the more we're going to really latch in and understand who they are and want to root for them within your novel. So this is really important for just engaging readers and making them laugh, making them cry, making them feel like they're sitting in the room with your characters. So if we go back to our earlier mystery novel that we were talking about in the beginning, let's say that we're creating a profile for the main character, which is Detective Sarah Thompson. She is a coffee lover with a keen eye for details. She has a fear of heights and a mysterious past that involves her college boyfriend having cheated on her. Now she inherently distrusts men. So you can see if we take this character, place them in a situation where they might have to solve a crime up at the top of a high building, or spend a lot of time at the top of heights for her job in order to solve a case where she's only working with men, and maybe the client or the people she's solving the mystery on behalf of are men. And there's an interesting dynamic that happens where she has to learn to trust men in order to solve the mystery. Very interesting. And maybe her partner only drinks tea. I don't know. There could be conflict there. So again, developing characters is such a critical point before you even begin writing the story. Okay, so tip number 5 is about creating a writing process or writing practice. This is so important because you are probably at this point very jazzed about your idea. You've got your characters, you've got your outline. It's like, yes, let's write. Well, life can get in the way, and there are going to be days where we're tired, we've been working, we have family, all of the life things. The laundry needs to be folded. So what's really important is that we try and create as consistent a writing practice as possible. And within that is important that we continue to show up even when it doesn't always feel great to. And that's okay. We're not always going to have a perfect day of writing. It's just important that we're kind of building that muscle, that habit of showing up and writing. And so one of the things that can really help with that is to set very realistic goals. So yes, I know your overarching goal is to write a novel and write a book, and that's great. But how are you going to get there along the way? What are some of those smaller milestones that you can hit and measure along the way? So maybe it is you have a goal of writing 1,000 words a week. That's a wonderful goal. You can break that down into multiple writing sessions throughout the week, even if they're only 15 minutes long. It doesn't need to be hours long, it could just be 15 minutes. So think about, again, if you're writing towards, most fiction novels sit around 90,000 words. So really think about what's realistic for you. I know it can feel so romantic to want to maybe go to the beach for the weekend and in a weekend write a novel, and I would admire you if you're able to do that. Best laid intentions, I have tried that, maybe got 5,000 words written that weekend because I just wanted to be out in the ocean. So set realistic goals as you are creating your writing process. So tip number 6 is around your editing and revising process. So for your first draft, I just want you to get your words on the page. It's okay to go back and read a little bit of what you previously wrote so you know where you need to pick up and continue to read, but please don't sit there and go back and edit from the beginning and then kind of write some words and do that every single time you sit down. You can have as many revisions and edits on your manuscript as you want, but it's so important that you get the first draft done so that you have something to edit. So this is really important, just to get your idea, again, out onto the paper without judgment. There's no shame. No one ever has to see your first draft. This is just about you getting your story onto the page, and the magic really does happen in the editing process. So when you do get to the editing process of your novel, after you've written your first page, I first hope that you're celebrating, because that's a magnificent milestone, and it's so, so critical that you celebrate that. So congratulations. And I want you to know, again, you can make as many edits and revisions to your manuscript as you want to. And one of the things that has been super helpful for me and helpful for some of my clients is to actually read your manuscript out loud. This is a great way to understand if dialogue sounds natural, if you're any awkward phrases or errors, or if something's just not flowing and not working. It really helps you kind of experience a story in a different way than just rereading it on the page. Okay, so tip number 7 for how to write a book is to seek feedback. So this will happen not after your first draft, remember that's just for you, but after you've done some edits and revisions and you feel like it's in a really good place, this is a great time to seek feedback and invite other people into your process. So if you look at the acknowledgement page in the back of a book, you will see that there are so many people who come in and support writers on their journey, part of which are readers. And so bringing in beta readers, which are your first readers, into your story can be a really great way of getting feedback. These can be paid or unpaid. They can be people you know or people you don't know. I sometimes lean towards people you don't know and people who love to read in your genre, because they're going to understand what the flow and expectation is of most readers of that genre. So that can be a great way to engage readers and to really give feedback on kind of, were the plot twists surprising? Did you connect with the main character? And you can take in this feedback and really decide what's most valuable for you as the author and what you think will be most valuable for the reader. You do not have to accept all feedback, but I do encourage you to consider it. So as beta readers are giving you feedback, this is also a great time to be seeking out editors. So a developmental editor like myself is someone who will come in and really look at your story structure. So they're going to come in and look at kind of your point of view, your character development, your story structure. Again, looking at that arc of the story with the 3-act structure, for example, we're going to look for plot holes, any inconsistencies. So this is a super high level look at your novel, making sure that it is as elevated as it possibly could be for the reader experience. And then, of course, from the developmental editor, you can work with a line editor who then hones in on the grammar and the structure and the spelling pieces of it. And this is really going to help, again, kind of elevate and round out your book. So there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to how to write a book for the first time. But these 7 steps are a very high level overview to get you started and get you moving towards that accomplishment of having a book into the world. So remember just to start by fleshing out that idea, fleshing out your characters, and getting the words onto the page are the most important parts. And then the rest of the feedback and going towards publishing will all fall into place. And just remember along this process that all authors face challenges. There are different things that are going to come up along the way, and that is okay. Even J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, had so many challenges along the way and faced rejection. And so that is okay. This is about getting your story off of your heart and into the world to share with other people. And that is what's most important. So I invite you to share with me what genre or what you're currently working on in the comments. And then be sure to like this video and subscribe and share it with anyone else you might know that's interested in writing a book.